Hello and welcome to another episode of the Maverick Mystic Arts podcast. We'll be continuing on with the last phase of the Step 10 training, right? And this is exploring Franz Bardon's initiation into Hermetics and use functions of a number of the qualities and skills developed over the course of the initiation training. Okay, so continuing on, we finished with psychometry in our last episode. So today we start with the influence of the memory. So there's a lot of different ways to influence memory, and this can be done through willpower, through auto-suggestion, if we're talking about ourselves, right? You can even there's modern techniques that involve defabricating trauma connections to different memories, and you can use visualizations and softening the visual cues or softening the audio cues and all these different types of mechanisms, right? There's EMDR and tapping and all kinds of things. Now, when we're working from this standpoint, we want to be very cognizant of what is doing the work, what is choosing to change a memory or to soften or essentially delete a memory from the data bank, right? Now, we are, as humans, we tend to be very, very attached to our memories. Our memories, our past, is what makes us who we are, right? That's very important. Our memories and our past, our reflections and connection to that inform who and what we are now, right? That is the sum total of our history and our experience, and it is through our experience that we form our views and our perceptions of the world. And I'm not talking just the conscious memories that present themselves, but everything that exists in the subconscious, that's baked into the nervous system and the fascia and all of this stuff, right? The body, there's a saying that the body keeps score, right? And we become the sum total of our experience. So, with that being said, if you're doing any type of work with other people, you want to have the utmost respect for that and what it is. And when you're working with yourself, before working with anyone else, definitely it's a good, I wouldn't recommend working with anybody else until you've explored all this stuff with yourself very, very thoroughly for a long time. So you have a very deep recognition of how all this stuff can affect you, right? How it can affect another person, okay? So we are the sum total of our experiences. So if we're going to make an alteration from, and Bardon suggests using the Akasha for this as sort of the deepest way to work with this, then what is dissolved, if you were dissolving a cause, you need to replace it with another cause. If you are dissolving a cause and you leave it, it will be filled by just randomness and chaos. So there has to be a lot of care put into what that cause might be. Now, the place from which this work is done matters. If it's done from any perspective of the smaller, ego, then, it's a pretty arrogant thing to do, right? It's hard to imagine a higher narcissism than that this little tiny thing, this little tiny ego, knows better than the karmic chain of cause and effect. Even in the Buddha's own words, the intricacies of karma, of cause and effect are so vast as to be incomprehensible. So any work that is to be done from this standpoint needs to be worked from a place of connection with the incomprehensible, with that which is so vast as to be incomprehensible. So this is where the depth of the actual meditative practice and practicer, the evolution, becomes so important, because you truly need to be giving up yourself completely. And this is probably the best safety mechanism when working with any of this stuff, is you aren't doing it, right? And we want to be clear that access to, say, a certain bandwidth of Akashic substance, that doesn't mean that you understand the intricacies of how this stuff can permeate, right? There are causes in place, let's say just from a personal standpoint, that without those causes, those causes are part of your path in this life. And if you dissolve those causes, you can almost dissolve your connection to this life. So really make sure that if you're tinkering, don't tinker with other people, tinker only with yourself, and ideally have as much respect for and reverence for yourself as you would for anyone and anything else. And if you're the type of person that doesn't have any reverence or respect for anyone and anything else, then maybe don't tinker with anything, and go sit in the cave for a while, where you can develop some sense of connection and reciprocity. So, memory. What leads you to where and what you are, right? Who are you? What is the identity? So as you practice more and more and more, you start to work with more and more refined, or release into more and more refined substance and emptiness substance, and more of an absolute base in reality. And all of this memory, all of this experience starts to wash away. And at this point, we stop, to greater or lesser degrees, identifying with our past. Not just the conscious past, and I'm sure we've all heard people talk about how they've gotten over this issue, it doesn't matter, whatever. But they certainly talk about that a lot for having gotten over it, right? So there is the base, the full influence of these events, of these experiences that make us who we are, that are baked into the body, baked into the emotions, baked into the mind's perception. And in a sense, through that, over time, they start to become baked into the Akasha. So through our practice, we begin to dissolve these roots, right? These causational roots, as they permeate through the physical, the astral, the mental, and the Akasha. And we become free from our experiences, free from our identity. And this is what allows us to take on more and more what we might look at as honest and all-pervasive, sincere goodwill, compassion, these types of things. These are not things that you necessarily try to have. These seem to find their way into a person based off of the practice, right? All of these qualities that you might hear about in spirituality, as the identity releases more and more, as the recognition of interconnectedness evolves more and more, a lot of these qualities find their way. They bubble up, out of the Akasha. We start to become these qualities. This is innate to the path. if it's being worked from a certain through a certain direction of a grander and grander cosmic connection and liberation and emptiness. A lot of these qualities evolve naturally. And if we try to impose our lower-minded, our lower ego's idea of what these qualities might be, then you become a zealot, right? If you're engaging in practices of, purity, for example, and in some systems, at those stages, you might take on like a vegetarianism type of thing, a do no harm type of thing. And if that's come to through imposition, then you develop a one-for-one that being vegetarian equals purity, right? But this is just a stage. And it can be a very useful stage to help break habits and break an old identity, all right? But there is much more. As you begin to recognize the life within everything, the same sense of connection that you might have for an animal, you have for a plant. You recognize life. You don't just recognize it intellectually, you can feel the life. So your gratitude for what you consume, for the stuff that makes up you and the life that's transferred from one shape into another. It permeates with breath, it permeates with food and water. This view expands more and more and more. And if we attach to certain qualities, compassion, whatever it might be, we run the risk of attempting to impose what is right onto other people, right? And this is almost impossible to do. It's almost impossible to impose a way of being onto other people if you've come to those views through a holistic practice, essentially. If though they have arisen quite organically through equanimity, if anything that is a byproduct of equanimity and release tends to be saturated with equanimity and release, surrender. And if you recognize how you came to certain understandings through a liberative type of relationship, then you can't really impose the opposite of a liberative standpoint onto other people so that they do an effect and don't work through the causes, right? And again, effects are just a slice in time and space. Things keep evolving. Always, always, always. So, identity, memory, be very, very cognizant and allow for a ripening understanding and cognition of what identity and memory is, right? We need to, over time, wash through, and essentially you end up cleansing your past out of the body, out of the emotions, out of the mind, and basically out of the Akashic planes as well, or your Akashic reference and body as well. And from this, you are then free to unify with higher forces, cosmic realities, etc. So this allows for the continuation of the spiritual growth. Now, as you keep going, more and more refined substance will stimulate deeper layers of things you haven't quite touched on yet, or that haven't quite been purified. And as anyone who's done this work would know, you can't, it's very difficult to hold a part of you, or view a part of you as an enemy and have it leave you, right? There is acceptance, an acceptance of the richness that experience offers, and that washes through. and that permeates, and the acceptance is super, super important. So once again, in relation to our own selves, anything you pressurize fights back. So if we observe a part of ourselves that starts coming up and we start forming judgment and we go, okay, I'm going to release this thing, get rid of it, all this stuff, very often we haven't actually touched into all of the tendrils that reaches to, and there can be very dire ramifications. So we have acceptance, and we express a type of, well, mainly just acceptance. You observe that from the place of essence, the essence as well of that particular quality, and you keep meditating, you keep practicing. And over time, both the, how can we say this, the, say, Akashic cause and what it's replaced by, this becomes a simultaneous function. And it works in layers, where the old identity, causal identities dissolve, and the new causal expressions, whatever the upgraded version of it is, essentially they dissolve, they materialize and dematerialize simultaneously, right? And when this is worked in this manner, then you don't run the risk of dematerializing a cause that is part of your path and leaving with nothing there, right? Both the materialization and the dematerialization come from a place far beyond a lower-minded decision, right? And that's a very, very, very important distinction to make in your practice, right? So open-mindedness, right, and exploration, dissolution of acting from the lower mind in any way whatsoever, for this type of work can be really, really important, okay? So that's a little bit about influencing memory. You can read more about what he says specifically here. Okay. Now, the next stage is working in the Akasha, right? Which is a lot of what we've just been talking about. Not stage, but the next just point to be discussed here. So Akasha is to Saturn, right? Which is to destiny, fate, etc., the causal plane, right? So when we start to make alterations in the Akasha, and he mentions this here, you want to do this in connection with what he calls divine providence, or essentially, the highest absolute divine relationship that is present, right, that you're capable of. What happens when you start dissolving or altering fate in the Akasha, it can be pretty intense, right? As we said, it can be incomprehensible, and it can be so easy to leave out, to not know of and not be able to acknowledge everything that is part of cause. Because literally everything, everywhere, for all of time and not time, like all of everything has contributed to now, right? Whether it is, cosmic catastrophe and, asteroids blowing up the world, like everything that has happened in all of everywhere has contributed to this moment arising as it is right now. So, pretty arrogant to think that, the conscious mind and the lower identity understands all of everything. So when we start making changes in the Akasha, you can discount or disregard as we mentioned earlier, what has set us on this life path. Different habits, for example, or memories that are part of how we are navigating this life and are our teachers in this life. And it's important, I found it very, very helpful from a teaching standpoint, like a learning standpoint, or a cosmic teaching standpoint, to have some recognition that this refraction of essence, this my Akasha, this essence chose this body, chose the circumstance is for a reason. So what would that reason be? Now you can go, oh well, this is just a way of trying to make the most of situations, and even if that's where you want to leave it, it's good enough, right? So what's there, right? How are certain habits leading you in a certain way? And they might be like negative reflections of certain element imbalances or whatever. But when you try to alter these in the Akasha, the elevated or octaved up expression of direction, for example, that maybe you're not tapping into that. So those, until the evolved relationship with different habits is made, they serve as a direction. A lower relationship with your identity and history and past serves to direct you. And sometimes that direction is, it's a fate, a destiny type of Akashic direction, right? So in order to continue in that path of fate that is of like your highest, right, far beyond your own choices, from any lower state of acknowledgement, the processes can need to upgrade and evolve so that it is not a negative tendency that is directing you, but much higher. So if we dissolve or alter the fate from the perspective of Akasha, you might alter, or you would alter the entire cause and effectual network from that moment onward. And you do. Every interaction, every thought, every emotion, every action, this permeates, right, and reflects. Right? And as you start to recognize how you have been affected through karma and cause and effect, as you start to become more and more aware of the subtleties of your mind, of your emotions, of your body, of your thoughts, as your relationship with the Akasha grows and grows and grows, and strengthens, you start to recognize how you are a part of the karmic network, right? You are a part of the karmic web and the causational web. And so you start to take much more care in the view that you have, and the thoughts that you have, and the emotions that you have, in how you see others, the actions that you take, etc., because you recognize the potency of these and the ramifications that permeate through time and through space. So, you might, one could say that, okay, well, making an alteration in the Akasha, changing fate, what's the difference between that and anything else? And the main difference is that the place from which that change occurs is so far beneath the mental, the astral, and the material existence that the effects can be even more far-reaching than anything we can cognize. So, how you work with all of this stuff is from beyond your own directives, essentially. Right? You go into a place of the deepest equanimity, into a relationship. You dive through your relationship with your essence and Akasha into a place that is so far beyond anything that's here. You become essentially a conduit or a channel for the evolving universal forces, essentially. And this is sort of at the higher stages of the practice, right? Up to that point, you're doing practices. Then there's a point where just stuff is happening through you, okay? And that doesn't preclude one from engaging in more specific practices, but the cause and effect become simultaneous. And this is a big jump. Instead of doing this practice for eventually this result, as an example, from more of an absolute perspective, you connect, and the most ideal Qi Gong or meditative practices and cosmic relationships, the practice is inspired of the moment through an entire non-self type of relationship. Okay, so anyways, this is can be a pretty brain-busting type of concept to discuss, all right? Working with the Akasha, memory, cause and effect, all this stuff. So you meditate on it, and you keep working through the relinquishment process, the surrender process, the developmental process. And over time, this stuff starts to all, it starts to evolve you in and of its own accord. Okay, so anyway, I hope you found this helpful. There's a few more of these topics to get through here, but they're really good to discuss. Bardon offers some specifics in terms of how you might choose to practice them. The purpose of this entire walkthrough series has been to offer just another perspective, having gone through the work and explored almost all of this stuff, a lot of it. So you get a perspective on where deficiencies might be, some things to take into account that might be deleterious to the path, that might help in a positive way with the path, and then always just to explore with your own intuition, creativity, goodwill, joyous nature, and all that fun stuff, all right? So, thank you for watching. Thanks for your time. Hope you enjoyed this. If you are interested in training, there is the courses online in Tai Chi and Qi Gong, Hermetic Alchemy, and Meditation. I offer private lessons online as well. These are 2-hour lessons, and we go real deep with the meditation and transmission in these. And lastly, this should come out in time. I have a retreat coming up here in British Columbia, Canada, June 2025. You can check out details on the website. All right, thanks a lot. Bye.